Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Repeateron, and today we're going to be doing another Deep Rock Galactic tier list. This is going to be looking at each of the grenades from each of the classes, and then ranking them based on how good or bad I feel that they personally are. So first up we have the Impact Axes. This is the Driller's default throwable. This is a very interesting throwable because you get quite a few of them compared to the other grenades. You get 8. In total. You can throw these, and if you don't hit an enemy at all with it, then you can go pick them up, which is pretty useful. You can reuse them. You can also use this when you're resupplying them as well. Throw them into the ground or into a wall or into the ceiling, preferably a low ceiling, and then do a resupply, and then you can still have those axes there if you need to pick them up. This is really good for dreadnought fighting because the axe is quite powerful. It has a 2-step hit mechanic, I guess, where the actual direct hit of the axe will hit and deal 50 melee damage, and then you'll do a second melee damage as well, doing 110 damage, and stunning the target for 1.5 seconds. This also can apply to anything that's nearby as well. So it does have somewhat of an AoE. This has a pretty decent chance of breaking armor, and it's probably one of my favorite throwables in the game. Even though it's not really a grenade, it still is probably one of the best ones, because if you can freeze something, hit them with the axe, or just hit anything in the weak spot with the axe, or if you need to stop, say, a Praetorian from spitting on you, you can throw the axe into their face, and it will stun them, and then you can usually get away. It's great for allowing your teammates to run behind and kill things like Praetorians. Or if you manage to get behind something like a Praetorian, you can also just throw this right into their back, which is really devastating to them. And again, if you miss, it's not a big deal. Alright, up next we have the HE grenade from Driller. This is the high explosive grenade. This is a very standard grenade that you will be very accustomed to if you've played any other FPS games that involve grenades. You throw this out, and after a short delay, it blows up and fears all enemies near it. So you can carry 6 of these, which is a good amount of grenades. It does 140 area damage. It has 400% armor breaking, so it's great for breaking apart anything that does have thick armor, like the Praetorians. And it has a fairly large radius, too. It also doesn't do the most friendly fire damage, which is great. This one's all around a pretty standard grenade and pretty good. There's nothing really wrong with it. The only real reason that I don't use the high explosive grenades all that much is usually because I'm using the axes, and I just kind of love those things. The high explosive grenade, though, is still probably A tier. It's still pretty good. And then Driller's last grenade is the Neurotoxin Grenade. This one's kind of an unusual one. You get the least amount of it out of their grenades. You get 4. When you throw this, it starts emitting gas. This gas affects a 7.5 meter radius. It does damage over time, as well as it slows enemies that walk through it, applying the neurotoxin. This can be pretty useful on maps that have regenerative bugs, because it will cancel out their regeneration if they're taking little chunks of damage over time. The gas that it emits is also highly flammable, so you can burn it and cause an explosion, and it's pretty good for that. Slowing enemies and poisoning them is pretty nice. I don't tend to take this grenade a whole lot. I still don't think it's a bad grenade by any means. I just don't think it's as good as some of Driller's other grenades, so I'm going to put it into B tier. Still a pretty solid grenade. It's not going to let you down or anything. I just wish you got a couple more of them for what it does. Then it would probably be pretty fun to play with them with the flamethrower, especially if you're running like a sticky fuel flamethrower and just causing everything to slow down and burn. Alright, up next we have the Engineer's Grenades, and their first one is the Lure. The Lure is a decoy grenade that you toss out. It spawns a copy of the Engineer that's dancing in front of the enemies, taunting them to come and attack it. This works best against small enemies. Against larger enemies, there is a chance that they might just ignore this. And if it is destroyed, it will do a slight amount of damage to all enemies around it, being electricity damage. So it has a high chance of putting the electricity status effect on them, which is pretty good. That will make it so they are slower and they take more damage. So this has a 20-second duration. You can carry 4 of these, which is not the most. And the hologram does have a health of 50. This is a rather interesting grenade. I actually really like the Lure quite a bit. It's pretty fun to use. It's very forgiving for new players because you can't hurt your allies with it. The worst you can do is, I guess, throw it when there isn't any enemies around, and then you just wasted a grenade, in which case you would waste any grenade unless it's the axe. But the Lure is a pretty solid grenade. I like using it quite a bit, and I'd probably put it up into high A tier. I think I'd put it above the high explosive grenade. Up next, we have the Plasma Burster Grenade. This is a very interesting grenade. This is a bouncing grenade, so when you chuck it out, it'll hit the ground and bounce and explode multiple times. You can carry 6 of these, so you can carry, I believe, the most of these out of any of Engineer's grenades. They are the only grenade that does direct damage when you toss this out on an enemy. So you do have that going for you. It does 60 damage with the explosion. It can have up to 4 explosions. The explosion radius is 3.5 meters, and it can set these off fairly quickly based on the environment that it's bouncing off of. This also has 100% fear factor, so it can scare enemies away. It does decently well against breaking armor, and it also does decently well at killing yourself and your friends. The Plasma Burster is probably the most difficult grenade to use that Engineer has, and maybe one of the most difficult grenades to use effectively. It can do a good amount of damage, but it is somewhat unreliable, because if you use this enough, you'll know that sometimes you chuck the grenade and it seems like it will bounce around the enemy and deal a lot of damage to them. But sometimes you just get like that one angle where you're just hitting the ground at the right point, or the wall at the right point, and it's just throwing it, throwing your grenade somewhere where it doesn't even do anything, which is rather annoying. This does take quite a while getting used to. It is pretty fun to play with, though. I will admit that. It's probably one of my favorite grenades to play with. But for a damaging grenade, it's probably like high B tier. It's still pretty good once you get good with it. But it's pretty dangerous for you and your team if you're just throwing these out randomly. You can kill yourself and your team fairly quickly with plasma bursters. Alright, and their last throwable is the proximity mine. So you toss this out, and then it takes a little while to open up, and then it sets out this mine where if anything steps within the radius, you can see the radius because it emits yellow. Anything steps inside that, it will blow up, dealing damage to all enemies within that and all friendlies within that. This does 110 explosive damage when it goes off. It has a 100% fear factor as well to scare enemies away, which is great. You can own 4 of these, which is not the most. It does take 3 seconds to arm this, and its maximum damage radius is 3 meters, but its max radius is 5 meters. This grenade is pretty good because you can toss it on the ground, on the ceiling, on the walls, wherever you need it to be, and it'll stick there. It will only last for so long, though. After a while, it will just go away. You can't just have an entire minefield of these. I've tried, and it doesn't work because they will start breaking. This grenade can also take some getting used to. It's not the most user-friendly because in certain areas, it's really not best to use these proximity grenades. You can kill your friends and yourself easier than you can kill enemies with it. If you are using it, make sure that they're spaced out. They're very easy to use on salvage missions. I think I'm going to put them in low S tier. I think the proximity mines belong in low S tier. They would be higher up if you got more of them. If you got 6 of them, they'd be fantastic. With 4 of them, they're still pretty strong. And just the fact that you can set up such a good kill zone with Engineer, I think puts them up a little bit higher because you're going to be combining these with your sentry gun. So starting out, we have the Sticky Grenade for the gunner, which you can carry 6 of these. They do 20 damage on direct hit, and on direct hit they have a 250% fear factor, so they can scare enemies away quite well with them, which is kind of nice for this grenade. And then it will explode, dealing 90 damage to the direct target that it's stuck to. It'll do 130 damage to all enemies around it, also applying the fear effect to them. It has a maximum damage radius of 1.5 meters, with the total explosion radius being 4 meters. So it can do quite well. It doesn't do the best against armored enemies, at least if you're not hitting them in their weak spot. If you do hit them in the weak spot, the Sticky Grenade can be quite good. This is another very standard grenade. Anybody that's played any sort of FPS games will be aware of this. It's like a Semtex or a Plasma Grenade or something like that. It's not bad. I like it quite well. I would probably put this in low A tier, similar to the high explosive grenade. They're very basic grenades. Up next, we have the Incinerator Grenade, which works very similar to a Molotov. You get 4 of these. When you throw it out, it does 100 heat damage. It has a 1.5 meter explosive damage radius, but a 3.5 meter total radius of where the fire will spread. It doesn't do the most friendly fire damage, but it's pretty easy to hit your friends with the Incinerator Grenade because it does have such a wide radius. This does damage over time to anything that runs through it, and it lasts for about 6 seconds. So it's again, it's pretty much like a Molotov in pretty much every other game. The Incinerator Grenade is all around a pretty decent grenade, but it's still probably going into like B tier. And then we have the Cluster Grenade, which this one is, well, a stick grenade with a bunch of small grenades attached to it. When you throw this out, it spawns 9 little bombs that will then explode. You can carry 4 of these grenades. They have a 50% chance to stun enemies, which is pretty good. That's for each individual bomblet grenade hitting something. The stun duration is 1.5 seconds. It does 40 damage per bomblet that hits anything, and it has a 2 meter maximum damage radius with a 3.8 meter effective explosive radius. You can do a good amount of friendly fire damage with these two, and the bomblets are really not the most reliable. They kind of go flying wherever, but you can do pretty well against small and even large enemies with the stun is pretty nice. If you chuck one of these directly at a Praetorian, you can stun it, which is pretty good. You can throw this into a crowd of swarmers or a crowd of grunts, and it does quite well. You can kind of get this to work against the flying enemies, but it's pretty unreliable. So the Cluster Grenade, I'd probably put it like somewhere higher up into B tier. It's okay. It's not bad. All right, and then we've got Scout Grenades. So we've got the IFG, or the Inhibitor Field Generator. When you toss this out, it will slow all enemies that walk into it. It has a 3 meter effective radius that lasts for 15 seconds. You can hold 6 of these grenades, and anything that walks into this will be slowed and weakened. So you slow them by 75%, you weaken them by 30%. Overall, this is a pretty good status grenade. It's really good if your teammates are running something that can benefit the slow. Scout already can use this pretty well, especially if you're trying to revive allies. You can throw this to where a lot of the bugs are running, and they'll just be slowed down so you can actually pick up your allies. If your teammates are like a driller, both their primary weapons are very strong, like their flamethrower, you can just burn everything inside. Their cryo gun, you can just freeze everything inside. It's overall a pretty strong grenade. I would probably put the IFG somewhere up into A tier. All right, up next we have the Cryo Grenades. The Cryo Grenades, you get to keep 4 of these. When you throw them out, they can freeze all enemies around you. They apply cold to everything. They apply 250 cold. It has a 3 meter effective damage radius with a 6 meter total radius. They don't do very much friendly fire damage, and if you toss these in quick succession to one another, you can freeze large enemies like detonators, and if you freeze a detonator and kill it, it won't be able to explode. This is probably one of the best status grenades in the game. I wish you got more of them, but if you got more of them, they might be a little bit overpowered then. I would probably put the Cryo Grenade up into S tier as well. I'm not sure if I'd put it above the Axe, or around the same level as the Axe. Both are really good, but for different reasons. And the last grenade that Scout has available is the Pheromone Canister. The Pheromone Canister is kind of an odd grenade, as you throw it to pretty much paint an enemy with it. So you chuck it onto an enemy so that they then get tagged, and other enemies nearby will attack them. This has a 4 meter radius that it can hit things in. You can carry 4 of these, and that painting of an enemy lasts 10 seconds. So this can be kind of useful against things like Praetorians or Dreadnoughts. You toss something like this on them, or an oppressor, and then you cause all the other enemies to start attacking it, which is pretty nice. However, I've never really found this grenade to be as useful as Scout's other grenades. It's okay. I've never really had a problem with it, but it feels like half the time it really doesn't do much. I would probably put this one in actually C tier. So I don't really see a great use of the Pheromone Canister. I could be wrong. I might be missing something about it. I didn't put any grenades in D tier because I don't think any of them are. I think they all have at least some use. So this is my complete Deep Rock Galactic tier list on the grenades. Tell me what you thought about them, where you would place them down in the comments below. I'm really curious to find out your guys' opinions. Thank you guys so very much for watching this. If you're new here and you haven't already, be sure that you're subscribed. That way you get notifications whenever I post any of these videos. And I will talk to all of you guys next time. Till then, stay cool and bye.